I mean, negotiation is part and parcel of daily real estate life, and we negotiate in property management between landlords and tenants all on a daily basis. The big negotiations are between buyers and sellers. Now, naturally, we can never forget that we represent the seller and that our job is to get the best possible price on the best possible terms for the seller. But naturally enough, we have to develop rapport with buyers in order to put a good negotiation together and achieve the goal for our clients. So we always need to remember that we have a contractual relationship with the seller. And I am talking here about the seller's agent, not buyer's agents. That means they have become a client, and therefore we have certain obligations, both at common law and under the rules of conduct and the Agents Act and so on, to our clients. The buyer is a customer. They're covered under consumer protection law as well, but we don't have a contractual relationship with them. Except in very rare circumstances can we act as an agent for a buyer. And there is one situation that springs to mind, and that is at an auction. If the buyer refused to sign the contract, then the agent is entitled to sign on their behalf. But it's probably the only occasion. Certainly the only one that springs to mind. And it's important, to always bear that in mind. We must deal honestly, fairly and professionally, the law says, with all parties to a transaction. But bear in mind that we've always got to act in our client's best interests. I think the first one is when a buyer submits an offer to you, to ask them what their position would be if the offer was rejected. And remarkably enough, a lot of buyers will say to you, oh look, I would pay another 5, 10, 15, whatever it is. We've got to remember our fiduciary obligations here, act in the client's best interests. Our job is to extract the best possible price we can. That would then allow us, if that was the case, to go to the owner and say, look, this person's put an offer on the table. They've indicated they may be willing to pay more, and at this point I just need an authority to reject the current offer so that I can go back and extract a higher offer. And that process should go on until the buyer says, well, no, I wouldn't pay any more. And then your seller's in a position to say, yes, I'd take that, or no, I wouldn't. What the rules of conduct say is that you've got to act honestly, fairly, and professionally with all parties to a transaction. So you've got to keep your buyer in the loop. My seller's thinking about it overnight or until next week or whatever it is. If a subsequent offer was made on the property, there's some argument about whether you can or cannot reveal that subsequent offer or the amount of the offer to the first purchaser, but certainly you'd need to make them aware that an other offer had been submitted and give them the opportunity to raise their offer. Underquoting to buyers usually happens in an auction situation. So people come to inspect the property in the pre-auction period, and they'll frequently ask the agent what sort of amount the agent expects the property to sell for. Now, a bad practice that has been employed in the past by unscrupulous agents is to mention to the buyer a lower price than they think the property is going to sell for in order to get the buyers to attend the auction. And then the agent hopes that the process of the auction will drive the buyer up in price. It's an offence. Now, it's not an easy situation to deal with because as an agent, if you just said, well, I've no idea, come to the auction and find out, you'd turn a lot of buyers away. Probably the best thing to do is to rely on the information that you use to give your opinion to the owner. So that's past, recent, comparable sales. And there isn't any reason why you couldn't give the same information to buyers and say, look, these are some recent sales. I don't know what's going to happen on the day. Maybe it'll snow and not many people will turn out. Maybe it'll be well sought after and achieve a premium price. But I do know the only way that you can have a chance of buying it is to actually be at the auction with your chequebook and your finance approved, ready to purchase. But don't underquote a price. Yes, there are. Rule of Conduct 22 is, in the agents regulations, is very clear. And a couple of things. Number one, you must present offers as soon as is practicable after receiving them. And one thing that a lot of agents may not know is that you must identify to the seller the name or names of the persons making the offer. And if it's a company, the company name and the name of the directors. So if a buyer said to you, I want to make an offer on a property, but I don't want the owner to know who's making the offer, then you would have to tell them, look, I can't do that. I have to reveal the name of the buyer or potential buyer to you. The other area of possible pitfall is that you're required to submit all offers right up until you're informed that contracts have been formally exchanged for the sale of the property. So if you knew that a contract was being exchanged today and a higher offer was being submitted, yes, of course the temptation is, well, maybe I'll just hold off, but no, you must submit that offer. The only time when you don't have to submit an offer is when the owner has instructed you in writing not to submit any further offers, or it might be not to submit offers under a certain value. Okay, this is in sales. Sections 84 and 85 of the Agents Act talk about pre-contract information. And this is where we're referring buyers or sellers onto a third party to use the third party's services. So that might be people like solicitors, mortgage brokers, valuers. Now, if we have any relationship with those third parties, then be they business or financial or a fiduciary relationship, that must be declared in writing. Whether or not we get any gain out of the referral, the relationship's got to be declared on the disclosure document. If we get any benefit, a referral fee, that also has to be declared. What the legislation's saying is that as an agent, we have a vested interest. We want to get a deal over the wire. When sellers and buyers go to third parties, they should be getting independent advice where there's no vested interest. So if there's a connection between the agent and the third party, the question then arises, well, is this truly independent advice? In a lot of the large franchise networks now, they employ or have a finance arm. So frequently when a buyer's negotiating the sale of a house, the salesperson says, do you have finance arranged? Perfectly legitimate question in negotiation. The buyer says no. Would you like me to introduce you to our mortgage broker? Straight away you've got a business or fiduciary relationship there, got to be declared in writing on a disclosure form. Negotiation also forms part of a property manager's role, and it might be negotiating over maintenance, repairs, who's to do what. But very frequently there's negotiation involved over rental increases. Now you can't increase the rent more than annually, or when there's a change of tenancy agreement. You really do have to look at your market. If the market's very strong, then you can increase the rent to current market rate. If the market's not so strong, you may be advising the lessor that they don't raise the rent at a particular time. The Residential Tenancies Act in the ACT sets out a formula, and if the rent increase is within that formula, the tenant has no right of appeal to the tribunal about the increase as an unfair increase, but of course they have the right to not renew the lease. If the increase is above that formula, then Section 68 of the Residential Tenancies Act sets out a whole range of matters that the tribunal must consider, and the Act says must consider, in deeming whether that's a fair or an unfair increase. So where rent increases are above the formula, then the tribunal becomes the arbiter as to whether it's a fair increase or not. The tribunal has three options. They can allow the increase, not allow the increase, or allow part of the increase in the rent. I think it's one major thing, and that's focus on interests, not positions. So what we're talking about here is always looking at what's motivating your buyer or your seller to be where they are at this time, and focus on those things. The position is always the price, and it's very difficult to get a win-win situation there. But if both parties can see that their needs were met, then it's easier to, or much easier to get a win-win position. I think the other thing is empathy and showing that you really care. And one way you can do that, if you're talking to a buyer, use the word we. So you might be going back to a buyer after an offer's been rejected and say, look, I think we did okay here. We did all right. The offer wasn't accepted, but I think if we raise, a bit more, then, we might be in a winning position. And the same when you're talking to the seller. Use the we. It shows you're in it with them. Other than that, I just think being professional. Don't use high pressure tactics. Don't bully. Be straight with people. Keep people informed. They're the keys to being a really good negotiator. Don't suggest to buyers ever that the seller might take a lesser price than that which is indicated on your listing agreement as the asking price. Our job's to try and get them the asking price. So to suggest that the owner might take a lesser price is clearly not acting in the client's best interests. Always reveal the name of the buyers to the seller when submitting an offer. You're required by law. Do submit all offers right up until the exchange of contracts. And the best line I've ever been told about negotiation when speaking to a buyer who's expressed interest in a property is simply to say, would you like to take it?